Hey everyone, I am back with another video. If you are new to my channel, hi there. I am Avia LeVon. I create content to help you be successful and ultimately just create a life that you love. So I do that by sharing different professional, fashion, beauty, and lifestyle tips. On Instagram, you guys have asked for a lot more travel content, so that's what I'm going to be doing for you guys today. I'm going to be sharing my top tips for traveling. And I'll probably do a part 2 to this video. There's still so many other tricks and tips when it comes to travel. I thought this is just kind of a good one to start us off with. So this is making sure that you're not spending too much on travel and just kind of some of my hacks to go around that. So let's get into the video. I have my friend that's with me. Come here. Come here. Say hi to Benny. All right, you can go. You might hang out, so that's just kind of my disclaimer. Okay, I want to start with my tip number 1, and that is to be flexible. I would say being flexible when it comes to your travel, and this is more on the leisure end, obviously, goes a long way and can save you a lot of money in the end. So when it comes to leisure travel, people usually aren't that flexible. If you think about it, you know that one location that you want to go to, you have that 1 week of time off where you know you're going to do it. So that kind of puts you into a corner. So instead, try being a little bit more flexible, set a couple of locations that you want to go to, and have a various amount of dates that you could potentially take that travel. See what kind of cheaper locations appeal to you, and then just kind of pick your dates from there. And if you're able to do that and you have that luxury, you will end up saving so much money kind of through traveling journeys. And this tip is mostly for when it comes to flights, and that's honestly sometimes the largest expense that you could have outside of lodging. But obviously this tip doesn't always work if you have a set schedule that you have to work on. For example, some of that might be my work trips, but so instead I just try and be really good about planning out my calendar and schedule. And if there's any flights that I have to take to that, I'm thinking about it so far in advance, I'm able to track those prices via Google Flights, and just I will always plan to book those flights whenever they look to be the cheapest. So that's kind of how I combat that, is just by definitely thinking ahead, kind of being ahead of it and planning when it's set and fixed, and then if it's not, being flexible and letting kind of the prices determine your travel. Okay, but with all that being said, I think that brings us to our next point, and that is that timing matters. So timing matters in a whole slew of different ways. Usually I would kind of recommend, if you're booking domestic flights or something like that, to try booking your flight usually a month to 3 months out. Obviously the closer that you get, the more expensive that fare is going to be, so you want to stay away from that. With international flights, the range is a lot larger. You could probably do anywhere between 2, which would still get you to the expensive side, but occasionally you might find some really good deals, to about the 8-month, almost a year out kind of time frame to buy international flights. That makes a huge difference. I don't really think it's not a thing actually, but there was this myth that was you should only buy flights on Tuesdays because they are a lot cheaper, the flight tickets are a lot cheaper. I don't think that's true at all, but in the past, before now, we're kind of where we are now when it comes to all the technology and everyone's traveling and it's a whole thing. Tuesdays when they used to kind of load flights into kind of the systems for consumers to go buy. So that's when you had a lot more options, therefore it was a lot cheaper. But now technology is crazy and there can be a new flight tomorrow for a trip that you're trying to take. So it's all kind of mixed and matched, and it can really be anything. So I think that's a complete myth. So book your ticket whenever, but just try and plan to fly on the cheaper days of the week. Okay, so another tip is to avoid traveling during the peak months. Obviously, again, if you have those fixed travel dates or planned occasions, you might not be able to avoid that. But if you're traveling completely for leisure and you have the flexibility to kind of pick your trip to be whenever, travel during kind of off peak. It makes a huge difference when it comes to your pockets. So usually the off peaks for most places anywhere between January to May. Those tend to be a lot cheaper, and then September through December. But that does exclude major holidays if you really think about it. So, and especially in the September to December realm. Obviously Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve is going to be stupid expensive to go anywhere, and then the occasional holidays that you have around the spring season as well. Okay, my next tip is to find companies to be loyal to. I have absolutely loved this. I guess it's just kind of a luxury tip that I have, but I have become a complete snob when it comes to being loyal to certain companies. So I only fly Delta, minus a couple exceptions. and I try to only stay in Marriott resorts. And so if I can budget for it, I definitely want to try and include it in my travel plans because it helps me out more in the long run. But so being loyal to certain companies in the kind of tourism industry comes with a ton of perks. So right now I am gold medallion with Delta. So that gives me free upgrades on flights. I have to pull up the list so we could just kind of go through everything. But it just comes with so much. They make my booking experience and travel experience so much easier. And so, it's really a game, you know, so they have me where I won't want to book with anyone else. So my next tip is also with my previous point about kind of being loyal to a company. And that's usually when you're loyal to a company, you join their rewards program. So that's essentially what it is. So there are so many different rewards programs out there, and like usually they're kind of somewhat on a point system or some sort of like gamification, which is really cool. But anyway, so with some of these reward programs, I have just taken it to the next level because it can come with more perks, which for the different companies that I'm loyal to, which I really like. So for example, for Delta and Marriott, I've chosen to get their credit cards. And so by spending money that I'm already planning on spending, it gets me kind of more travel points, which is awesome. So if I know I'm about to go spend money on groceries or something like that, I'll usually put it on one of these cards and pay it off immediately. And the $100 that I spent in groceries usually converts to, depending on, they have like different point systems for different things, but would usually kind of correlate to 100 points in Sky Miles. So that's really cool. So that all kind of go towards my travel. So it's a really cool tip if you have the ability to do something like that. Just be smart about your credit, obviously. And so Damon and I only use it on like purchases that we know that we're gonna make and that we can pay off immediately. And then it just helps us in the long run when it comes to our travel. And another cool thing is reward programs also have like they do partnerships. So Delta and Marriott have a partnership too, so I can somewhat transfer my Marriott points into Delta Sky Miles, something like that somehow. Delta has a partnership with Lyft, so every time I spend money with Lyft, I get Sky Miles. So there's just a whole bunch of like weird, knacky things like that. And so once you kind of learn them, you're become even more loyal to other companies because that helps your main boo. You know what I mean? So we do that like all the way whenever we can, and it makes sense. But everyone has some sort of like partnership programs with different companies, so you'll just have to look into it further depending on whatever program or company you decide to be loyal to. My next tip is to use tools to help you plan your travel. So my main tools are like very simple but make a difference. I love using Google Flights. It's kind of recently new, maybe a couple years-ish. Nothing drastically new, so I'm not like breaking the internet with this. But it's just a really awesome tool for you to be able to search all your flights. The only downside is like they don't show you immediately within the interface what the prices are for Southwest. I'm not really sure what it is, but so if there's a flight time that you like that you want to see more into, you'd have to actually click into the Southwest like line of that, whatever that flight is, and it takes you to the Southwest site so you can see the flight price, and then you go back to Google Flights to compare it to everything else. Only downside, but again, I fly Delta, so it just shows there, so that's cool. But so I can check flights for absolutely anywhere, which is cool, and compare them all at one time. So kind of like a Priceline or Expedia, but they also just have some really cool features because it's, you know, the ultimate search engine of Google. So I can look up multiple airports at the same time, and I love doing that when it comes to international travel. So being out of Atlanta, I could either fly quickly and easily out of Atlanta, obviously, maybe Nashville. I could go to some airports down in Florida. I could go to Charlotte or Raleigh, or sometimes a lot of really good international flights also come out of Washington, D.C. and New York. So if it really came down to it, I'd be willing to travel to one of those airports to get to a really cheap kind of overseas flight. So with Google Flights, I can put in all those different airports and look at flights coming out of all of those to any abroad city that I'm trying to get to. I can compare prices, and it makes it so much easier. So yeah, Google Flights is really cool. There's a lot more features. I won't spend like this whole video going through it, but it's just really awesome, and I love using it to just kind of compare all of my options. Obviously, TripAdvisor is like amazing. So a lot of times I'll plan a lot of our trip activities off of TripAdvisor and all of the reviews. And then lastly, I also watch YouTube for all of my travel. So I like to watch vlogs of any location that I'm thinking about going to. So lately I've been watching a lot of like Thailand and Bali and a whole bunch of places, like cities in Thailand, vlogs that YouTubers are making. And so that way I can kind of see what they're doing. And that gives me a good idea of what it is that I might be interested in doing and what I think I could pass on. Okay, another tip that I have is to budget. So I have a video on my channel about just kind of how I budget. I think I might do another one that goes either maybe specifically into how I budget for travel or just a shorter yet more in-depth video on just my budget in general. But anyway, so I have one for you to go check out. So I talk about how a portion of my budget is travel. And so every time I get paid, I always allocate some money towards my trips. So I always have like a flight category that I throw money into every time I get paid. That way, if I see a really cool flight deal and I am flexible and able to do it, I'm able to just kind of purchase them on the spot. And then, you know, I'm going somewhere and then figure out my hotel or whatever else later. So I try to budget all of that out. And so I do that kind of through intense planning, and that kind of allows me to be able to figure out how much I want to spend on a certain trip. And so I do my damnedest to stick and stay to that budget that I planned out for a trip. The tip is to always stick to your travel budget. And the further out that you're planning, the easier it is on your wallet. And so you just kind of either pay for stuff in increments or, you know, part of my bank account is, like I said, for my vacation. So I let that kind of grow over time, and all that money goes to whatever my next trip is. When it comes to budgeting and budgeting for my trips, I like to use two tools. So one is YNAB, which I talk about in my budgeting video, and then the other is Capital. That is an app that you put for your phone. I don't know if they have a desktop version. I don't know, maybe. I wouldn't be surprised. But so essentially you can just kind of set different rules. You can link your bank account. You can set some different rules around my purchase at $1 or $2. Or every time I get paid, take X percentage of my paycheck, or every time I go shop at Target, you know, take $5 extra from me. If you want to like curb spending habits or anything like that. Withdraws money from your bank account based off of some of the different spending rules that you set, kind of holds it into another kind of separate account. Sometimes, or a lot of times I usually have vacation goals within Capital, and I can save for my vacations that way. So usually anything that I'm, you know, spending normally, one of my favorite rules is the roundup rule. Every time I spend something, I'm also saving a little bit for my trip too. So that is really awesome and a cool way to kind of have some extra funds for your trip. Another tip that I have is to find cheap flights. And I'll probably break this one down into multiple like sub tips. Flights are obviously one of the largest expenses that you'll have when it comes to travel outside of your lodging. So the cheaper that you can find them, and there's always deals on flights, the more that helps you out. One tool that I like to use to help me find cheap, one of the couple, so I like using Google Flights, and then I also like using a newsletter listserv called Scott's Cheap Flights. So he sends out almost daily emails on like any mispriced flights, any flight sales, literally anything. So you just have to be ready to purchase pretty much when his flights come out, and you don't know necessarily when or where they're going to be. But we did that when we were going to Italy to go visit my sister. So we weren't quite as flexible with this trip, but we knew about a year out that we essentially were gonna go to Italy in November over Thanksgiving. So if there were any flights that he sent out that was anywhere within Italy that were under $500, we were gonna take it. So yeah, so we, well, my dad purchased them. Thanks, Dad. I put him on to Scott's Cheap Flights. But so Dad got an email and it was like, hey, cheap flights to Italy this week. I think the fares will last a day or two. And he'll list like the cities and what the approximate flights are and what he thinks the usual date range is. So usually he'll be like, I think these fares will last a day or two. You can take your trips between March of 2019 to May, and then it's usually off-peak is kind of what I noticed, or September through December, excluding Christmas or whatever else. And so you'll kind of go and search for these flights, and they're usually around the prices that he kind of quotes you at based off of the cities. Not all cities are included for every kind of flight deal that he finds. Oddly, like Atlanta is kind of a hard city to fly out to to fly out from for international flights to get flight deals, which I thought was interesting. But always on the list is Washington, D.C. and New York. So if I can find a cheap flight there, that's cheaper than whatever. But yeah, so Scott's Cheap Flights is amazing. So you just have to be ready to book, but it's a really cool tool to just kind of be able to see what some flights are. So I feel like all the time I'm texting Damon like, hey, do you want to go to Vancouver? Flights are $200. Or, hey, do you want to go to Morocco? Flights are this much. Or, hey, do you want to go here? And he's like, whoa, chill. But I love it. Also, on the flight realm and finding cheap flights, you always want to find whatever the cheapest flight is actually overseas. So a lot of times you might be taking connecting flights or have to kind of piecemeal your trip together. But so long as you're always getting the cheapest fare to actually go over an ocean when it comes to international travel, you are definitely saving money. I have my notes down here, so I'm trying to make sure that I'm not missing anything major. Okay, but yeah, so those are my tips. I'll probably do a part 2 to this video. Let me know if that's something that you guys would want to see. There are so many more maybe like in-depth traveling tips. So this maybe is more of the like pre-booking travel and like how to plan to get ready to take your travel. But I am happy to do so many more videos on just kind of travel tips and tricks. So maybe I can do a part 2 that's more like, okay, you booked your travel, now what? And here are all my tips and tricks. Let me know if that's something that y'all would be interested in. But check out some of my other travel videos that I have on my channel. I'll put the playlist, if I can, up in cards, and also have it down in the description bar below. Be sure to follow me on social media so you can keep up with all of my different travel adventures and just kind of seeing what I'm up to and how I'm kind of balancing all of the shenanigans. Let me know in the comment section below if you have taken any cool trips recently and where those were. Maybe you'll give me some ideas on some of my next trips that I might want to take. Or if you have any other really good traveling tips down below, let's all help each other out, you know? All right, but yeah, I'm not gonna hold this up anymore. But don't forget to subscribe and click the bell button so you know when I'm like uploading any more videos. That'll be really helpful to me. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys. Did you eat that? Like, is it gone? Is it under your arm? You didn't finish that. You just licked your lips. You finished it. That's great. Can't do it? No? 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 Bentley had a language. It'd be physical touch, and then second by quality time. Can you stop? Bent. Stop. 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 Get down, please. Okay, so I want to start with my tip number 1 is to Bentley.